So I'll be honest with you, I'm very frustrated and very angry because this is the third time I'm filming this video. It's not good. So that's a good introduction. So hello, I'm Delia. This is the second ever video on my channel, and it's also the second video as part of my summer reading project. So in my first video, I told you that I want to do something to help to give me motivation to read more, and that something is filming myself talking about books, doing book reading vlogs, book reviews, and so on. And in that video, I told you that I started reading Brave New World, and I wanted to do reading vlogs for it, but I didn't because I didn't go any place to any aesthetic place to read in because we had a heat wave, so it was basically hell outside, and I had to stay in my house. And I didn't film myself in my house because I realized I'm not comfortable filming myself in bed. So no reading vlog, but I still wanted to talk about this book and I wanted to do a book review. And I filmed two book reviews that are completely unusable, and now I'm on to the third one. I gave up trying to set up a nice background, so you'll just have to deal with my piano and an empty wall. And I also gave up putting on makeup because I might also delete this, so why bother? Frustration aside, let me start talking about the Brave New World. So I've divided this video into 5 parts. We have first introduction and summary, which will be the parts without spoilers, and then we'll get into the world, characters, and ultimately in the conclusion, which will be the part with spoilers. So you've been warned, this video is going to contain spoilers. I want to say that I will tell you when, but me being very frustrated and this video probably being quite chaotic, I don't know exactly when. If you want to read this and you want to make sure you don't get this book spoiled, then you can just click off and turn to this video after you've read the book. So, without further ado, let's get into the first part, the introduction. Some general information about this novel. It was written in 1932. If you know just a tiny bit of history, you know that 1932 was during the period between the two world wars. So the world was kind of crazy at that time. On one hand, you have a very rapid technological development. On the other hand, we have a lot of political instability. This is the period where the book was written, and Huxley, what he tried to do with it is explore the impact, especially the dehumanizing impact instability and technology will have on humans. And I think he managed to do this pretty pretty well. It is quite difficult to do a summary of the novel without getting into how the world works, but I'll try to do my best, leaving a lot of details out that we'll get into in the next part of the video. So the plot of the novel: we have this character called Bernard, one of our protagonists, which works up the courage to ask Lenina, which is one of his romantic interests, to come with him to a savage reservation, on a trip to a savage reservation. So these savage reservations exist in this Brave New World because they are in parts of the planet, in parts of the globe, that are not very prosperous. So the people in power decided that it's not profitable and feasible to implement a system like the system of the Brave New World in those areas. So it was better to just leave those people be, and continue to live as savages, or what they call savages. Whether they are savages or not, from our perspective, this can be debated, but I'm not going to do that because if this video is going to be very long anyway. So they go to the savage reservation. There they meet other two characters, which are Linda and John. Linda is a woman who comes from the Brave New World, but she gets lost on a similar trip to Lenina and Bernard. She gets lost in the reservation, and the group she's with just abandons her there, so she is forced to live with the savages. Another thing that happens to Linda is that she gets pregnant, and pregnancies in the Brave New World are a big taboo and no-no, so that's something that doesn't happen. But through the fault in maybe the birth control pill or something, Linda is pregnant and she gives birth to John. So John is our main character, you could call him, although he's not present for most part of the book. So John is genetically speaking, he is a brave new worlder, but he grows up in savage reservation. After the trip, Bernard decides to bring Linda and John back to the brave new world, and then some other things happen. But we're already at the end of the book, and I'm not going to tell you what, because that goes into spoilers. So this was my spoiler-free part. From now on, I will definitely mention some spoilers. So again, you've been warned. You cannot blame me. Let's talk about the world. First of all, the concept that Huxley started with is having a totalitarian regime that controls people through pleasure rather than to pain. In 1984, we have the population is controlled through torture, through fear. They are constantly being monitored. Well, that happens in the Brave New World too, but they are constantly afraid of the authorities, of what might happen to them if they don't abide by the very strict rules of the regime. Well, we don't have that in the Brave New World, because in the Brave New World people happily comply, because complying means getting a lot of pleasure. And this happens through the process of conditioning. So in the Brave New World, people are conditioned from the very conception to be perfectly content with the place they're in society, and with their life. Another thing that helps with this stability and with this content is that society is very strictly divided into castes, and we have the higher caste, which is alpha, going the castes are named by the Greek alphabet. So we have alpha, which are the highest ones, and it goes down uh, through the letters of the Greek alphabet. So it's alpha, beta, and I don't remember what the next one, but the last caste is epsilon. So epsilon are the lowest caste. Um, and alpha are the highest both in intellectual capability and in physical strength. Epsilon lowest, again, both in intellectual capability and in physical strength. So from the very conception of a person, it is decided first what caste they are going to be a part of, and then what role they are going to fulfill in society. Because every person fulfills a specific role in this society. So all the system works perfectly and very efficiently in order to ensure stability. Something else I forgot to touch upon is how this world came to be, because this is relevant for our discussion later on. It came to be after a very destructive and violent war. So there was this war in the world, and after it, people decided that they need to change something if they want to make sure that humanity isn't going to go extinct. And the system of the brave new world is what they come up with. It is also here worth mentioning that they don't call it the Brave New World. The title of the book, and it comes from one of Shakespeare's play, The Tempest, and the title is actually given by John, by the Savage. But for sake of ease, I'm going to call it the Brave New World or the Civilized World, even though they don't call it that. So this is how the Brave New World came to be. People wanted to come up with a system that would ensure stability, efficiency, that would keep people content, so they don't have any reason to rebel, to be violent, and to start any other wars that could potentially destroy humanity. Now, I would argue that humanity is destroyed anyway, but at least it's not through a violent war. So, as I said, people are conditioned from their very conception to like and to enjoy their life, to be content with their place. So even if you're an epsilon, epsilons have no desire to move up the social hierarchy, because they are conditioned to all sorts of processes that Huxley describes in quite a lot of detail to like their position and to enjoy their life. And this proves to be a much more effective way to control the population, because they have no reason to rebel. They have no reason to look for something else, because they are in a constant state of sedation, you can call it. They are in a constant state of feeling pleasure. There's no reason for them to search for something else. Whereas in 1984, people are in a constant state of terror. So it kind of comes naturally for Wilson to try to escape that. In Brave New World, you don't get that, so and it proves to be a much more efficient way of controlling the population. Now, building upon these ideas, one can't help but draw some parallels between the world in the novel and the modern world today. And there are a lot of people who have said that, oh, we are living now, we are living in the brave new world. I'm not as pessimistic. I think this is still a very exaggerated representation of technology's impact on human life, but still there are some uncanny things that are quite similar in today's society, and one of that being people's value being placed on how much they produce. In our capitalist systems, we see that companies tend to view their workers only as workers and nothing else. So this definitely happens, not to the extent in the Brave New World, I think, but it's still something that's worth discussing. On one hand, I think this is natural, and maybe it would be a bit ridiculous to say you should be paid just for existing, but it is with the point where people's life is value only in the amount they produce or amount they buy. And this is something that companies do to people, but people do to themselves as well. Because if you think of it, it's especially being surrounded by social media with all sorts of holes and things like that. It is very easy to believe that, oh, if I want to be something, if I want my life to have meaning, I need to buy the latest iPhone, or I need to have the new stylish clothes. But it's a trap that is very easy to fall into. It's not only, I think, the fault of companies. Don't get me wrong, there is the fault of companies, but it's also our fault, and it's definitely something that our society is very susceptible to. Again, not to the extent that we see in the Brave New World. I think people who say that are a bit too pessimistic, and I tend to want to be a little bit more optimistic. But that's something that definitely happens. Another similarity that you could draw between the two worlds is the constant stimulation that people get, and their constant search for pleasure. So not necessarily for things that give them fulfillment, but for immediate pleasure that make them feel happy in the moment. So in the Brave New World, they all have constant music playing. They have sex that is seen just as a casual thing you do. They have orgies, so partnerships, family, all that is completely eradicated, and is seen as something that is very taboo. And people laugh and blush at the thought of having a mother or a father, or not sleeping with more people at a time. We are not at that point, obviously, but there is still this there is also this incentive, and it's easier for us to deal with our negative emotions by just making them go away through all sorts of meanings, be that being either scrolling through internet, either drinking, or buying things online. So again, this is another parallel that you could draw between the two worlds, not to the extent of the Brave New World, but something to note. So what is pursued ultimately in the Brave New World is efficiency and stability. As long as you keep people content, as long as people have different sources of pleasure, they have no reason to rebel. They have no reason to be angry. They have no reason to create any sort of conflict. The thing is, in my opinion, I think there's a lot to lose when you get rid of any sort of instability and negative feeling. Because I truly believe that that pain and suffering is part of life. So once you remove it, something you will remove something truly meaningful for life. I'm not fully in agreement with the savage who thinks that all life should be suffering, but I think we get something as meaningful from the sad moments as we get from the happy moments. And the way I illustrated or explained this in my head, and I'm going to share with you, is thinking about what I find to be one of the most valuable things in life, and that is having a meaningful connection to people I love in my life. Obviously, if you've been in a situation where you care deeply for a person, you probably will find moments in instances where that love brought you some kind of pain. It can be either because that person is in some kind of pain, maybe they're sick, maybe, I don't know, something happens to them, and because you love them deeply, then that affects you as well. If they go away or if they pass away, you ultimately get to feel sad because you love them so much. So on one hand, we get this joy and fulfillment out of loving someone, but this joy and fulfillment can also lead to pain and sadness. So it is true, if you eliminate the sadness and the anger and all of the negative feelings that you can feel, you create a more stable individual, but you also eliminate the happy feelings. So these are some of the things I wanted to say about the world. On to the second part, which where I want to talk about the characters. Before I start, I will say that the characters in this novel are not truly well developed. They're more like typologies of characters. There are different types of people that interact with the world, and I think their purpose ultimately is to show how the world works from different perspectives. And the first perspective we get is that of Bernard. Bernard Marx is an alpha, so he is part of the highest caste. But because of a mishap in his conception, the rumor is that someone dropped alcohol in his tube, but we'll never know exactly what happened. Nevertheless, because of this mishap, he is physically smaller than all the other alphas. And due to this defect of him, he feels inferior and deeply insecure about his position in society. So it is because of these feelings of insecurity that he starts to question the system. As opposed to the protagonist in 1984, where we have Wilson, who starts to develop doubts for the world he lives in, and he starts to look for a way out of this very restrictive and torturous regime. But what Bernard actually wants, or this is my opinion, maybe you disagree, he actually wants a way in. So he starts doubting the system. He starts having thoughts that are outside of what is, let's say, permitted. He starts acting unusual, meaning he doesn't want to sleep around with people and he wants to be alone, because he is an outcast, because he doesn't fit in. But his wish is ultimately to fit in. Now, I was wondering, why did Huxley choose this kind of character as the first protagonist, and why didn't he choose something like Helmholtz? I'll get to him. But maybe it is to illustrate the fact that even if people have doubts in the Brave New World, the conditioning is so efficient that even in that case, they still want to be part of it. So they don't really want to see what's beyond the Brave New World. They want to be fully a part of that society. Helmholtz, which is Bernard's friend, on the other hand, he doesn't have the same issues as Bernard, meaning he is a perfect individual. He fits very well within his caste, but he starts having this instinctive feeling that there's something beyond his work. So what he's doing, he works for the College for Emotional Conditioning. I think that's the correct one. So his job is to write stories that are supposed to condition people emotionally. So he deals with people's emotions, and in his work, he feels like there's something essential that he cannot reach. There's something that escapes from him, and it's that thing that he wants to pursue, but he doesn't know how. He doesn't have the language to, and doesn't have the meanings to do so, because emotions in Brave New World are treated like a source of instability. And like I said, you need to get rid of all of the emotions in order to keep the stability and the well-being of society. So Helmholtz finds himself wanting to see what's beyond, but being impossible for him to do so. And I personally empathize a lot with him, because he ultimately is a writer. Writers, when they write, they want to capture, let's say, the very essence of what makes us humans, the very essence of the emotions we feel. So it doesn't matter if it's a person that feels sad in the 18th century, or the person that feels sad nowadays, because if the writer does a good job, and if the writer manages to express that essence of the emotion, you will still empathize with it. And ultimately, I think that is what Helmholtz wants to do, but he cannot do so. And that is what makes him be very close to the Savage, because Savage comes into the Brave New World with extensive knowledge on Shakespeare. So once Helmholtz gets access to this literary world, he realizes that that is what he's been looking for. So I really liked Helmholtz's character, even if he isn't present for most of the book. The last character I want to talk about is arguably the most interesting one, and that is John himself, the savage. So the Linda's child who is born in the savage reservation, but genetically speaking, he is made out of two people from the brave new world. John truly finds himself at the impossible, let's say, intersection between these two worlds, the civilized and uncivilized. He doesn't fit in with the savages because he looks different. We are told that the savages have darker skin and he has lighter skin with blonde hair. So he looks different and he is different. So he doesn't fit in. He doesn't find his place in the savage reservation. So he's excited at the prospect of going to the brave new world and finally finding his people. But he cannot fit within the brave new world either because he is raised placing a lot of value on suffering. So he sees suffering as necessary in order to gain meaning in life, could say. Which is very, of course, very different from the way people in the brave new world go about finding meaning in life. And this is really well illustrated in his scene with Lenina. So the savage and Lenina do develop some feelings for each other, and ultimately Lenina decides to come onto him. So she makes an advance. The savage, who sees love as this very valuable thing, he relates all of his experiences through Shakespeare's works. And you know, in Shakespeare, love is this very important ultimate thing that is meant to be almost sacred. So when he sees Lenina so easily giving up his body to him, he is terrified, and his reaction is to beat her and to leave the society of the brave new world and go on a mountain, hoping to find some peace in solitude. He doesn't find peace because people form circles around him and gawk at him as you would watch an animal in a zoo or in a circus rather, because they find him very entertaining and they tell him to do all sorts of stuff. And ultimately, John chooses to take his life. So he cannot fit anywhere, and his only option is to take his life. As I said, characters are not very well developed, and I would have loved to see more of John's struggle and John's relationship with Bernard and with Helmholtz being more developed. I feel like Huxley glossed over the characters in favor of giving us very accurate details about how the world works. Now we're almost at the end of the video. In this part, I will try to conclude everything I've talked about. Overall, this book was pretty easy to read, easy to get through. The writing style, I think, has nothing remarkable. It's very effective if you want if you want at uh, getting us into the world and explaining the world to the reader, which is understandable. As much as I enjoy Virginia Woolf and her very poetic and ornate writing style, I think that style would have been very weird in a book about a world that is all about efficiency and eliminating all sorts of emotions. But ultimately, I liked it. I liked that it's easy to read. Some of the details about the world I found a bit boring, and again, I would have liked to see the same attention given to the characters that Huxley gives to the world. I must be honest, I find it quite difficult to form a personal opinion about this novel because it's so appreciated. And I can see why, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it doesn't deserve the attention and the praise it got. But it's when you read this kind of book, it's quite difficult to distance yourself from the public opinion and be on and express your own honest opinion. That being said, I say it was overall an interesting read. It definitely gives you food for thought, and I think that is one of the most important things that this book did for me. When it comes to writing style and I don't know how it did characters, it wasn't really my cup of tea. I like books that get a lot deeper into the psyche of the characters, but still, this book raises a lot of questions, and I think any piece of art and any novel that makes you question things and makes you think about how the world works and think critically about how the world works. I think it's a good novel in my books. So yes, this was my review for Brave New World. Third review, third the charm. Hopefully I will post this. Excuse the background, but didn't care too much to do it all again after two failed trials of filming this. At the end, if you would like, if you disagree or agree with anything I said, or you think there are a lot of things I haven't touched upon, I know you can discuss for hours about this book, but I wanted to keep it kind of brief as possible, so I don't have a 1 hour review for a 200-page book. So if there are things that I haven't touched upon, or maybe things you disagree with, I would love to hear your opinions in the comments. If you want to take a few minutes from your precious time to leave me a comment, I would really appreciate this, and I'll make sure to respond to it, because I love discussing about books. Ultimately, that is my passion. That is what I'd love to do my whole life. So I would love to hear your opinions on this novel in the comments. That being said, this was my second video from my summer reading project. What's coming next? I don't know. I started reading Orlando and I really like it. I'm not sure if I'm going to film a review for it, but I might film a video about Virginia Woolf in general, because this novel really made me rediscover my love for Virginia Woolf, and I think she deserves all the praise she gets, and even more, because she is a phenomenal writer. So I might film a video about that. I'm thinking of filming more other more casual videos, like my top 5 books that changed my life or something like that. I'm not sure. But until then, thank you if you've watched my first and my second video. I appreciate it a lot. This was my review for The Brave New World. I was Delia. See you next time.